Alina Carter moved quietly through the Valenti mansion, the kind of place where footsteps seemed to disappear before they touched the floor. Everything here was polished, guarded, silent. Even the air felt like it belonged to someone else. She smoothed Sophie's blankets, straightened her toys, adjusted the curtains to let in the soft morning light. It was the same routine she had done every day for 2 years, a rhythm that never changed. She had become part of the background, as unnoticed as the marble statues lining the halls. Sophie Valenti, 7 years old and full of sunshine, broke the stillness with her laughter. She ran into Alina's arms, her pigtails bouncing wildly. Daddy is in his office again. He is talking to the scary men. Alina kissed the top of her head. They are not scary, they just look serious. Sophie tilted her head. You look serious sometimes too, but you're not scary. The compliment warmed her, because it came from the only person in this house who actually saw her. Cameron Valenti, Sophie's father, ruler of the most feared syndicate on the West Coast, barely ever looked in Alina's direction. She had counted. In 2 years, he had spoken under 50 words to her. 50. She had memorized his voice without meaning to, low, calm, controlled. A voice that could order a man's death with the same tone used to request a glass of water. He was always in a suit, always flanked by guards, always carrying the weight of a world she did not belong to. His girlfriend, Vivian Ashford, treated Alina the way someone might treat a stain they couldn't quite scrub off. Vivian never used her name. She simply said the babysitter. She waved her hand dismissively whenever Alina entered the room, as if clearing away fog. Alina got used to pretending she didn't hear the comments, didn't feel the sting. One afternoon, Vivian breezed into the playroom wearing designer sunglasses even though they were indoors. Cameron wants you in the main hall, she announced, the words dipped in disdain. Apparently you're needed for something important. Miracles do happen. Alina ignored the jab and wiped her hands on her jeans before heading down the hall. The guard standing outside the door opened it without a word. Inside, Cameron stood by the window, his back to her, staring at the city that bowed to his name. Mr. Valenti, you asked for me. He turned slightly, not enough to face her but enough to acknowledge her presence. Pack your things, we leave tomorrow morning. She blinked. Leave, for where? 10 days in the Caribbean, he said. Business and recovery. She nodded even though she didn't understand. Sophie will need you. Be ready by 6. Before she could respond, he finally looked at her, really looked, and something shifted. A flicker of recognition, of awareness, passed through his eyes. It lasted only a second, maybe less, but it made her breath catch. Then he looked away, as if the moment hadn't happened at all. Alina stood there, unsure why her heart had begun to pound. Unsure why his gaze felt different this time. Unsure why the most dangerous man she'd ever met had paused, just slightly, when he looked at her like he was noticing something he shouldn't. She left the room quietly, holding Sophie's hand tighter than before, unaware that the trip Cameron ordered her to join would change everything she thought she knew about being invisible. The next morning began with a strange heaviness in the air, as if the mansion itself knew something was shifting beneath the surface. Alina woke before sunrise, the way she always did, but this time her heart was unsteady. She packed quietly, folding clothes with care, even though she had no idea why a mafia boss needed a babysitter on a 10-day trip that was supposed to be business and recovery. Sophie was still asleep, hugging her stuffed bear tightly, the only piece of softness in a world built on danger. When Alina stepped into the hallway, 2 guards were already waiting, not for her specifically, but because they always guarded the upper floor where Sophie slept. Still, she felt their eyes on her and wondered if Cameron had said anything about her traveling with them. It seemed unlikely. He barely spoke to her at all. She helped Sophie get dressed and braided her hair while the little girl chattered excitedly about beaches and seashells and swimming. Alina smiled even as unease curled in her stomach. Something about this trip felt wrong, and yet Cameron had not given her a choice. His word was law in this house and in half the city beyond it. Vivian made her entrance exactly when Alina expected, sweeping into the foyer in a white outfit that looked far too glamorous for travel. Her heels clicked like accusations across the marble floor. She glanced at Alina, then looked away as if the sight of her luggage was offensive. You brought too much, she said. You do realize this is a luxury resort, not a charity event. Alina kept her voice soft. I brought what Sophie needs. Vivian scoffed and turned toward the car where Cameron stood speaking quietly to his men. He looked powerful, dangerous, composed. Sunlight streamed through the open doors, catching the edge of his jawline. He wore a simple black shirt, but somehow it made him look even more commanding than a suit ever had. He was checking security routes, flight details, hidden risks that Alina would never understand. Then, for a heartbeat, he looked at her. The moment was fleeting, so quick, she wondered if she imagined it, but something in his eyes sharpened. It was not recognition, exactly not interest either, but awareness. As if he was registering her presence more than he ever had. Then he turned away again, and the guards moved into position, shutting the door on whatever that moment meant. On the drive to the private airstrip, Alina sat in the back with Sophie, while Vivian spoke loudly about cocktails and spa reservations. Sophie leaned closer to Alina, whispering that Daddy was acting strange today. Alina agreed silently. Cameron seemed distracted, not in a careless way, but in a watchful way, as though danger waited behind every corner. At the airport, the sight of the jet took Alina's breath away. Polished steel glowing under the morning sun. Men in dark suits standing like statues. Weapons she could not see but felt. This was not a family vacation, this was a retreat for someone who lived in a war. Cameron helped Sophie up the stairs, his hand gentle on her shoulder, a contrast to the cold control he showed everyone else. Alina followed close behind, feeling the weight of the guards' stares. When she stepped inside the jet, Cameron looked over his shoulder, his gaze landing on her just long enough to make her pulse jump. He was not looking at her like a boss looks at an employee. It was something else, something unspoken, something he pushed down immediately. Vivian noticed. Her expression tightened like a thread pulled too hard. As the jet took off, Alina sat with Sophie in the rear cabin, while Cameron remained in the front with his advisor and Vivian. Through the faint hum of the engines, she could hear low voices discussing territories, alliances, men who could no longer be trusted. She heard Cameron say, "Someone is watching my house," and her entire body went cold. This was not a trip, it was escape. And she had been brought along for a reason she did not yet understand. While Sophie dozed off against her shoulder, Alina stared at the clouds below them, completely unaware that this flight was the moment Cameron Valenti began noticing what he had spent years pretending not to see. And that in the Caribbean, surrounded by danger, desire, and secrets. The invisible babysitter would no longer be invisible at all. The resort looked like paradise from a distance, but up close it felt like a cage disguised as a dream. The Caribbean sun wrapped everything in gold, and warmth palm trees swayed gently, and the ocean glittered like glass. Sophie squealed with excitement the moment she stepped onto the sand, already kicking off her sandals. Alina smiled at her innocence, pretending not to notice the armed men positioned discreetly along the perimeter, pretending not to feel the same lead weight in her stomach that she had felt since the jet took off. This was not ordinary luxury. This was fortified luxury, a sanctuary for a man with too many enemies. Alina settled Sophie into their small cottage beside the main villa. It was beautiful, cozy, and painted in soft tropical colors. It should have felt like a dream, but the distance between her cottage and Cameron's massive villa felt deliberate, like someone drawing a line in the sand. She was staff, separated, contained. After unpacking, she helped Sophie change into a swimsuit, and together they walked to the beach. Alina wore a light cotton dress over her coral bikini, hoping to blend into the background the way she always did. She found a quiet spot under a palm tree where Sophie could build sand castles and she could keep a careful watch. The moment Alina slipped off her dress, the sun warmed her skin. She closed her eyes, breathing in the salt air. She looked simple compared to the glamorous women scattered along the sand, but she felt free for the first time in a long time. That freedom did not last. A shadow fell across her towel. She opened her eyes to find two men standing in front of her. Both handsome, both wealthy, both looking at her as though she were an unexpected treasure hidden on the beach. The taller one smiled, bold and charming. "I'm Brett and this is Jackson. Didn't mean to interrupt, but we noticed you. Are you staying here?" Alina hesitated. "Yes, but I'm here working. I'm watching Sophie. Lucky kid, Jackson said, with an easy grin. That color looks incredible on you, by the way. Heat rushed to her cheeks and not from the sun. Before she could respond, she felt something colder than ice slide down the back of her neck. A stare. A burning, watchful stare. She turned slightly and saw him. Cameron Valenti stood farther up the beach with Vivian beside him, but he wasn't listening to a single word she said. He was looking at Alina. His entire body had gone rigid, his muscles tight, his jaw clenched so sharply it looked painful. The ocean breeze pulled at his shirt, but he didn't move. He looked carved from stone except for his eyes. Those green eyes were dark, almost dangerous. Alina could not breathe. Vivian followed his gaze and froze, her expression turning sharp with jealousy and confusion. Cameron, she snapped, but he didn't look at her. Not even once. The two men near Alina kept talking, asking her to join them for drinks later, but their voices faded into a distant hum. Cameron's stare was too strong, too intense. It felt like being pinned in place by a force she did not understand. Then, without warning, he turned on his heel and walked away, moving so quickly Vivian had to hurry after him, calling his name. He didn't slow down, didn't acknowledge her. He disappeared into the shade of the palm trees, leaving Alina trembling under the sunlight without knowing why his reaction shook her so deeply. Brett touched her arm gently. Everything okay? Alina pulled her arm back at once. Sorry, but I can't. I'm working. She watched them leave, but her pulse never settled. Sophie called her over to admire her sand castle, and Alina knelt beside her, trying to pretend nothing was wrong, but her hands shook when she smoothed Sophie's hair. The man who never noticed her, the Mafia boss who barely spoke to her, had just looked at her with the kind of intensity that made her heart stumble. And for the first time, Alina realized something terrifying. Cameron Valenti had noticed her bikini, and he had not been able to look away. The sun had barely set when a message slid under Alina's cottage door, written in Cameron's unmistakable hand. Dinner at 7, all 4 of us. No explanation, no room for refusal. Alina stood there staring at the note with her heart thudding against her ribs. Sophie was already excited, pulling on a dress and babbling about fancy desserts, while Alina tried to quiet the twisting in her stomach. She owned only one dress suitable for anything remotely formal, a simple emerald wrap dress she had bought years ago for a cousin's wedding. She put it on with trembling hands, brushed her hair until it fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and applied the slightest touch of lip color. She was not trying to impress anyone, she reminded herself. She simply needed to look presentable. Yet when she looked at her reflection, she felt strangely exposed. The restaurant was elegant, white tablecloths, lantern lighting, and soft music drifting through the open terrace. Cameron and Vivian were already seated. Vivian wore a glittering gold dress that shimmered like she expected cameras to be watching. Cameron wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, the top buttons undone. He looked powerful, relaxed, and dangerous all at once. When Alina entered with Sophie, Cameron stood. For a breathless moment, his eyes swept over Alina, his gaze lingering on the green dress. There was something unreadable in his expression, something that sent heat flooding through her. "You look nice," he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. Vivian's head snapped toward him, her smile freezing into something sharp and thin. Alina managed to whisper, "Thank you, Mr. Valenti." They sat. Vivian launched into a monologue about a boutique she discovered near the resort, speaking loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Cameron's attention drifted often to Sophie, correcting her posture, telling her to stop swinging her legs. Sophie grew restless, picking at her napkin. Alina tried to comfort her under the table, tracing soothing circles on her hand. Vivian leaned forward, suddenly, her voice dripping with annoyance. "Sophie, please behave, you're making a scene." "She is 7, Cameron said coldly without looking at Vivian. "She's allowed to move." Vivian blinked in irritation. "Well, naturally, she's wild. She spends all her time with the babysitter." The word hit the table like a slap. Alina stiffened, but before she could speak, Sophie shot back, "Alina is better than you." The entire table fell silent. Vivian's eyes darkened. "You let her speak to me like that, Cameron." I let her tell the truth, he replied, without hesitation. Vivian's jaw fell open. Alina tried to intervene. Sophie, sweet girl, apologize, she whispered. But Sophie only shook her head stubbornly. Vivian's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. This is exactly the problem. You let her spoil the child, Cameron. Alina exhaled shakily. I let her be a child, she said softly. Cameron set his wine glass down with deliberate precision. Alina is an excellent caretaker. Sophie is healthy, safe, and loved. I won't tolerate anyone suggesting otherwise. The fury in his voice was not loud, but it was lethal. Vivian's face reddened as she tried to compose herself. The rest of dinner passed in tense, clipped silence. After the plates were cleared, Alina guided Sophie back toward the cottages, her heart heavy with confusion. She had never seen Cameron defend her so fiercely. Never seen him lose patience with Vivian so openly. Never seen him look at her the way he had when she walked in wearing that dress. Sophie was brushing her teeth when Alina heard footsteps outside. Slow, steady, purposeful. A soft knock followed. She opened the door a few inches only to find Cameron standing there, the ocean breeze pushing loose strands of hair across his forehead. His eyes were unreadable but intense. Is Sophie asleep? He asked softly. Almost, she whispered. What is it, Mr. Valenti? He looked past her toward the soft glow inside the cottage, then back at her. I wanted to apologize for dinner. Vivian was out of line. There is no need, she said quickly. This is your vacation, she is your guest. Cameron stepped closer, the shadows making him look even more dangerous. She isn't my concern right now. You are. Alina's breath caught. She tried to close the door a little, but he rested his hand lightly against it, not enough to force it open, only enough to keep their moment suspended. I saw you today, he said, his voice low as if confessing something he shouldn't say. On the beach, with those men, and I. He swallowed hard, something raw flickering in his eyes. I couldn't stop looking at you. Alina's pulse thundered in her ears. She gripped the door tighter, whispering, Cameron, this can't happen. He stepped back only slightly, but his voice cracked with something close to desperation. Tell me why. Tell me why I should walk away when for the first time in years something in me is actually awake. She had no answer. Her silence broke him more than words ever could. Cameron nodded once, sharply forcing control back into his voice. I'll give you space, but this isn't over, Alina. He turned, walking back into the darkness, leaving her trembling against the door, unable to deny the truth anymore. The Mafia boss, who never noticed her, was noticing her now. And nothing about the world felt safe anymore. The next morning came too quickly, and Alina felt it the moment she opened her eyes, a heaviness in the air, a quiet tension humming through the walls of her cottage. Sophie was already awake, drawing pictures on the little patio, humming softly. She looked peaceful, unaware of the emotional earthquake that had shaken the night before. Alina splashed water on her face, trying to steady her breath, trying to forget the way Cameron had looked at her, the vulnerability in his voice, the words she had never expected to hear from a man like him. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself she had imagined the intensity. She told herself it would disappear with the morning light. She was wrong. When she stepped outside, guards were moving faster than usual, their eyes sharp, their posture rigid. Something was different. Something was wrong. Alina's heart tightened. She took Sophie's hand and walked toward the main villa to ask about the day's plans. Vivian answered the door. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged her expression, a mixture of fury and humiliation. Alina froze instinctively. The air felt sharp between them. He's gone, Vivian said flatly. Alina blinked. Gone where? He took the boat at dawn, needed space from everyone. She said the last word with a pointed glance at Alina. Alina swallowed softly. I only came to ask what Sophie is allowed to do today. Vivian crossed her arms. Do whatever you want with her. That is what you're paid for, isn't it? Before Alina could respond, Vivian leaned closer, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper. Stay away from him. I don't know what you said or what you did last night, but Cameron and I talked. He was confused, overwhelmed with work and stress. He loves me. We are working things out. So forget whatever silly fantasy you created." She slammed the door before Alina could speak. Alina stood there, stunned, her chest tight, her fingers trembling. She felt foolish, hurt, angry at herself for feeling anything at all. She told herself Cameron had been honest, but maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe Vivian was right. Maybe he would regret every word spoken on her patio. She forced the thoughts away and took Sophie snorkeling, determined to stay focused on the little girl who depended on her. Sophie laughed, splashing in the clear water, collecting seashells, and telling Alina stories about imaginary fish kingdoms. Alina smiled and pretended everything was fine. But inside she was breaking. That evening, the sky burned orange and pink as the sun dipped low. Sophie fell asleep early, exhausted from their adventures. Alina stepped onto her patio, letting the warm night air wrap around her. The waves were gentle, the island quiet, except for distant music from the resort. She heard voices from the main villa, a sharp thread of anger weaving through the stillness. Vivian's voice, first high-pitched and furious. "You are throwing everything away, Cameron." Then his voice, deep, steady, but trembling with something deeper than anger. "I don't love you, Vivian. I respect you. I enjoyed your company, but I do not love you." Silence, then a choked sob from Vivian. "It's her, isn't it, the babysitter?" "Don't talk about Alina that way," he snapped, and the raw protectiveness in his tone made Alina press a hand to her mouth. "This isn't about her," Cameron continued. "This is about us. We are wrong for each other. We always were." Vivian's sob turned into steps, frantic steps, heels clacking across the pathway. She walked past Alina's patio without looking, her phone pressed to her ear, probably calling for an earlier flight. Then the world grew quiet again. Alina remained frozen, torn between guilt and confusion. She had not asked for this. She had not tried to break anything, but something was broken regardless. Minutes later, Cameron appeared, moving slowly toward her cottage, as though each step cost him strength. He stopped at the edge of her patio, his eyes darker than the night sky. "She's leaving tomorrow morning," he said. "I am sorry," Alina whispered, and she meant it for reasons she didn't fully understand. "Don't be," he said quietly. It was the right thing to do. He sank onto the patio steps, elbows on his knees, exhaustion pulling at his features. The man who always looked in control now looked undone. "I handled everything badly," he said with a slow breath. "With Vivian, with you, I am not good at this, at feelings, at being vulnerable. I haven't been good at it since Jessica died." Alina sat beside him, her fear battling her heart. "You don't have to explain anything to me." "Yes, I do." He turned his head, his eyes meeting hers with startling honesty. "I need you to know that last night wasn't confusion. It wasn't impulse. It wasn't a mistake. When I saw you on the beach, something in me woke up that had been dead for years. I can't stop thinking about you, Alina." Her breath caught painfully. "Cameron, this world of yours, it's dangerous, if anything happened." "I know," he whispered, his voice raw. "That's why it scares me. You scare me. The feeling scares me. But I am willing to face it if you are." Her heart ached with fear and longing. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Take your time," he said softly. "I won't push you. I won't rush you. When we return home, let me take you to dinner. Let me get to know you as a man, not as your employer." Alina looked at him, truly looked, and saw not the mafia boss, but the lonely man behind the armor. "I need to think," she whispered. He nodded once. "Take all the time you need. But know this, Alina Carter. I will wait for you." He stood and walked away into the night, leaving Alina shaking on the patio, realizing something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The man the world feared most, the man who had everything under control, had fallen for the invisible babysitter. And for the first time in her life, someone was willing to wait for her. The next few days slipped by like waves, rising and falling, never quite reaching shore. Sophie filled the hours with laughter and questions and endless energy, and Alina devoted herself to the little girl, trying to stay focused, trying to keep her heart steady. But it was impossible to ignore the new tension that hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Vivian left early the next morning, without a goodbye, without a glance in Alina's direction. The silence she left behind was almost louder than her voice. Guards shifted their routines, Cameron spoke less than usual, and the entire resort seemed to breathe differently after she was gone. Cameron kept his distance from Alina, but not his attention. She felt his eyes whenever Sophie tugged her hand, whenever she bent down to fix a sandal, whenever she laughed at something funny Sophie said. He never approached her, he never said anything inappropriate, but his presence followed her everywhere like a shadow that warmed instead of chilled. And that scared her more than anything. On the second to last evening, Sophie fell asleep early after a long day of swimming. Alina sat outside on her small patio, watching the ocean shimmer silver under the moonlight. She tried to quiet her thoughts, but they pressed against her like the tide against the rocks. Cameron's confession the night he stood on her patio echoed in her mind. His voice, the raw truth behind it, the vulnerability in his eyes. She tried to let it fade, but it stayed. She was not ready for the soft knock on her door. Alina stepped inside, quickly checked on Sophie, then returned to the patio, opening the door just enough to see him. Cameron stood in the moonlight, no suit, no guards, no armor. Just a man in a simple shirt, sleeves rolled, forearms tense, jaw clenched, as if he had been fighting with himself. "May I walk with you?" he asked. Only 4 words, yet her heart stumbled. She could have said no, she should have said no, but instead her voice betrayed her, and she whispered yes. They walked along the beach, silent at first, waves brushing over their feet. The moon hung low, glowing against the water. Cameron kept his hands in his pockets, as though afraid to reach for her. Alina kept her eyes on the horizon, afraid to look at him. Finally, he spoke. "I've been thinking about everything you said, the power imbalance, the risk, the danger, all of it, and you're right, it won't be easy. People will talk. Some will assume the worst, some will try to hurt us." She felt his gaze turn toward her, but she kept looking at the ocean. "But Alina," he continued, "I don't care about any of that. I care about this. About you. About the first moment I felt something real after years of numbness." Her breath hitched. She wanted to speak, but her throat closed. Cameron took a slow breath, steadying himself. "The truth is, I haven't been alive since Jessica died. I handled the grief the only way I knew, burying myself in business, in violence, in control. And I thought that was enough. But then I saw you on that beach and something in me cracked open. Jealousy hit me like a bullet. I didn't even recognize myself. It terrified me." Alina's steps faltered. She looked up at him for the first time and found his eyes shining with emotion she had never seen. Raw, honest, afraid. "I am not asking you to love me," he said quietly. "I am asking you to consider that maybe this isn't a mistake. Maybe this feeling between us is worth the complications. Maybe we both deserve something better than loneliness." Alina turned, fully facing him, now moonlight catching her hair, the ocean whispering behind them. "I do feel something," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I have for a long time. But I am terrified, Cameron. You're my employer. You're powerful. You could hurt me without meaning to. You could lose interest and I'd lose everything. And you're in danger. Loving you would put me in danger too." His breath shook as he stepped closer, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I am terrified too," he whispered. "Terrified of loving again. Terrified of losing you. Terrified because I know that if you walk away from me tonight, it will feel like losing my heart all over again." Her eyes softened. Cameron. That single word broke something in him. He raised a trembling hand, stopping inches from her cheek, as if asking permission without speaking. She leaned into his palm, her breath catching. Then the world disappeared. He kissed her gently first, almost hesitantly, as though afraid she might break. Then deeper when she lifted her face to him, surrendering to the moment. The kiss tasted of moonlight and ocean, and every unspoken feeling they had buried for too long. When they finally pulled apart, Alina pressed her forehead to his. "This is real," she whispered, "and that scares me more than anything." "Then be scared with me," he whispered back. "We will figure it out together." The waves crashed softly behind them, sealing a promise neither of them had planned on making. But both of them knew was already written in their hearts. The return to Los Angeles felt nothing like a homecoming. The moment Cameron's jet landed, the air around them shifted, becoming heavier, darker, colder. The island had been a fragile bubble where emotions could breathe, but here reality pressed in fast and merciless. Guards were doubled, weapons, visible tension, humming through the air like electricity before a storm. Alina could feel it. The moment they stepped into the mansion, something was wrong. Cameron walked ahead with Sophie holding her hand protectively, while his men trailed behind, scanning every shadow. Alina followed slowly, her heart unsteady. She and Cameron had not talked about the kiss, not with words anyway, but there had been a silent understanding between them. He had stayed close to her during the last days on the island, watching her with that same awakened intensity, but giving her space. Now everything around them crackled with danger. Before Alina could even take Sophie upstairs, Cameron gathered the entire household staff in the main hall. He stood at the front, hands behind his back, jaw tight, expression unreadable. His voice, when he spoke, was steady but edged with steel. "I want to make something clear to all of you. Alina and I are seeing each other." Silence crashed through the room. Shock flickered across faces, whispers rose like sparks. Alina's breath hitched, her pulse pounding. He never asked her beforehand, he just said it out loud to an entire staff trained to hear and repeat every secret that slipped through these halls. Someone in the back murmured softly with surprise. Another swallowed hard, shifting uneasily. A few exchanged glances because they had seen it coming long before Alina ever had. Mrs. Morrison, the head housekeeper, stepped forward, offering a small, warm smile that steadied Alina's shaking heart. "Well, sir," she said, "I believe most of us already noticed. We just wondered when you would." Cameron's gaze softened for a heartbeat before turning sharp again. There will be no disrespect toward her. None. If anyone has a problem with it, speak now or leave quietly. I will not repeat myself. No one dared speak. Not under the stare of a man whose power could destroy entire families with a single command. After dismissing the staff, Cameron motioned for Alina to follow him into his office. Her legs felt weak as she stepped inside. The door closed behind them with a final sound that echoed in her chest. "You didn't have to tell them," she whispered. "I did," he said calmly, "before rumors made it ugly, before anyone tried to get to you through whispers. I needed clarity for you, for Sophie, for the household, and for myself." She hesitated. "People will talk, Cameron." "People always talk," he replied, "especially in my world. They talk when they're bored, when they're jealous, when they're afraid. Let them. Their opinions mean nothing to me." But they meant something to her, and he knew it. Cameron stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Alina, I am not letting fear dictate this. Not anymore." Later that night, the whispers began anyway. Not inside the mansion, but beyond its walls. Society, women curious how a mafia king fell for the babysitter. Businessmen amused and critical. Enemies mocking him for showing weakness. And hidden among the whispers were others that chilled Alina to the bone. "That woman is his weak spot. If you want a break, valenti, go for her." Cameron heard every whisper through his network and immediately tightened security. Guards outside her room, guards escorting her everywhere, guards monitoring every vehicle. Alina felt as though the world was closing in around her. At first, she tried to be grateful. Then she felt trapped, then suffocated. She had traded invisibility for a spotlight she never asked for. One afternoon, while Sophie napped, Alina stood on the balcony, overlooking the garden, trying to calm her racing heart. She didn't hear Cameron approach, but she felt the heat of him behind her, the intensity he carried into every space he entered. "Talk to me," he said softly. "I am trying," she whispered without turning, "but I don't know how to live like this. People staring, guards following, knowing I am a target because of you." His chest tightened. "You're not a target, you're protected." "Protected," she whispered, "feels a lot like hunted." That tore through him. He moved to stand in front of her, taking her hands gently. "Alina, listen to me very carefully. No one will ever hurt you, not while I am alive." Her eyes softened, but her fear didn't disappear. Cameron saw it, and something inside him broke open. He cupped her face gently. "You are the first thing I have cared about in years. The only thing, and I know that makes this more dangerous. But I am not asking you to bear it alone. I am asking you to trust me to give me time to make this safe for us." Her breath shook as he leaned closer. "And Alina, you need to understand something else. I would burn my entire world to the ground before I let anyone lay a hand on you." His voice trembled with sincerity and fury, mixed into a dangerous vow. Alina looked into his eyes and finally whispered the truth that had been lodged inside her for days. "I do trust you, Cameron. I just don't trust your world." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest, as though shielding her from the world beyond the walls. "Then we change the world," he murmured against her hair, "one decision at a time, starting with this one truth. You are not invisible anymore. Not to me, not ever again." And as the sun slipped behind the horizon, Alina knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Loving Cameron Valenti meant risking everything. But losing him would cost even more. Danger began whispering long before anyone saw it coming. It started with small things, the kind that could be dismissed if someone wanted to pretend nothing was wrong. A strange car parked too long near the Valenti estate. A face in the crowd that appeared twice in two different places. A message Cameron's men intercepted containing only one chilling line. "The girl belongs to him. Take the girl." Alina didn't know any of this at first. All she knew was that Cameron had become restless, sharper, angrier. The kind of anger that wasn't loud but simmered under the surface like a fuse burning toward an unseen explosion. His men were everywhere now, guarding doors, escorting her through the mansion, monitoring even the garden where she took Sophie to play. Alina tried to pretend it didn't scare her, but it did. Fear lived in her chest, now heavy and constant. One morning, she stepped onto the patio with Sophie for breakfast, only to find two guards stationed at the edge of the garden, weapons tucked beneath their jackets. Sophie tugged Alina's sleeve. "Why are there so many guards today?" Alina knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "Daddy just wants to keep us safe, sweetheart." From what Sophie asked, eyes wide and innocent. Alina hesitated. Some questions should never be answered. She kissed her forehead softly. "Nothing you need to worry about." But she was worried, and Sophie felt it. Children always did. That afternoon, while Sophie napped, Alina tried, stepping outside for fresh air, but a guard moved to block the doorway. "I am sorry, Miss Carter. Cameron has asked that you remain inside unless escorted." Her heart dropped. "I am not a prisoner," she whispered. The guard looked pained but firm. "This is for your safety." She shut the door, her hands trembling. Safety was beginning to feel a lot like captivity. She pressed her back against the wall, breathing deeply, fighting the urge to cry. Falling for Cameron meant stepping into his world, but she hadn't realized his world had such dark corners. Cameron found her there minutes later. He had rushed in the moment he heard the door close too hard, his breath uneven as if he had run. "Alina, are you all right? What happened?" She looked at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. "Your guards won't let me leave the room. Cameron, this isn't living. This is a cage." He stepped closer, cupping her face, but stopped short when she flinched. It was barely noticeable, but he felt it like a blow. "Alina, I am trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" she whispered. "Or who?" Cameron's jaw tightened. He hesitated, and that hesitation terrified her more than any truth could. Finally, he exhaled, slow and painful. "Someone has been following you." The room tilted around her. "Me?" "Yes," he said, his voice low and rough. "Someone who knows you're connected to me. Someone who wants leverage. Alina, your existence in my life is no longer a secret. And in my world, secrets are safer than people." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "What does that even mean, Cameron? Am I supposed to hide for the rest of my life because of who you are?" He looked gutted by her words. "I never wanted this for you." "But you wanted me," she said softly. Silence. Truth. Undeniable. He reached for her hand desperately. "Alina, please listen to me. I don't care how powerful they think they are. I will keep you safe. I swear it. You just have to trust me." She stared down at their hands, his fingers trembling against hers. He wasn't lying. He was terrified. The unshakable Cameron Valenti was afraid, and not for himself. He was afraid for her. But fear didn't erase her truth. Cameron, I do trust you. I don't trust the world you live in. I don't trust the people who want to hurt you, or me. He stepped even closer until his breath brushed her lips. Then, well, leave it, he whispered. If that's what it takes. I'll walk away from all of it before I lose you. Her breath caught. Cameron, you can't leave your empire. It's who you are. No, he said quietly, you are who I am now. The vulnerability in his eyes broke her fear in half. She leaned into him, letting her forehead rest against his chest, his arms moving around her slowly, as though she might shatter. But even in his embrace, she felt it. A presence. A prickle. A shift in the air. Someone was watching from outside the window. Someone had come closer than anyone should have been able to. And without seeing a face, without hearing a word, Elena knew. The danger Cameron feared had finally arrived. That night, danger did not whisper anymore. It kicked the door in. The mansion had been quiet for hours, Sophie asleep in her room. Upstairs, Elena sitting at the edge of her bed, staring at the moon through the window, unable to chase away the feeling that something terrible was waiting just outside the walls. Cameron had been called into an emergency meeting with his men. A territory issue. A threat. Another warning. He kissed Sophie goodnight before he left, but his eyes stayed on Elena longer than they should have, lingering in a way that said everything without speaking. Stay in your room, he told her. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone except me. She nodded, but fear curled inside her like smoke. Sometime after midnight, the house shifted, not with sound, but with silence. A silence too sharp, too heavy. The kind that woke the instinct humans forget they still have. The instinct that says run. Elena stood slowly, every part of her alert. She stepped into the hallway barefoot, heart pounding. The lamps flickered, casting long shadows against the tall walls. She walked toward Sophie's room to check on her, but halfway down the hall she froze. A voice, low and unfamiliar, coming from downstairs. She moved closer, pressing her back to the wall, listening. Footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate. Not the guards, not the staff, someone else. Then she heard a whisper through a radio. Room clear upstairs next. Her blood turned cold. They were inside the house. Her first thought was Sophie, the little girl sleeping, unaware of the danger creeping toward her. Elena rushed to Sophie's door, pushed it open quietly, and found her curled beneath blankets, breathing softly. Elena lifted her into her arms. Sophie stirred slightly, but did not wake. Holding her close, Elena moved to the panic room Cameron had shown her on their first night back. It was hidden behind a bookshelf, simple on the outside, impenetrable on the inside. She pressed the panel, Cameron's code, unlocking the steel-reinforced door. Sophie mumbled, Elena, what's wrong? Go back to sleep, sweetheart, she whispered, breathing fast. You're safe. She placed Sophie inside, handing her the stuffed bear, then closed the door, sealing her inside darkness and safety. The moment the lock clicked, Elena heard someone on the stairs. Heavy boots. Multiple men. Moving faster now. Searching. Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped away from the panic room, trying not to make a sound. She could hide too, she could slip inside with Sophie, but the thought of men finding the door open, the thought of leading them straight to her, made her body go rigid. She had to draw them away. Every instinct screamed against it, but she turned toward the opposite hallway steps, trembling, heart hammering. She moved quickly down the stairs as the intruders reached the top. There. Female voice. Target moving. They saw her. Elena ran. She raced through the mansion, her bare feet slapping the cold floor, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Men behind her swore orders, were yelled, someone fired a gun, the sound cracking through the night. She ducked behind a column, shaking her breath, ragged tears stinging her eyes. The men spread out, searching, a predator's patience in their movements. Don't hide, the leader called, voice cold as death. We only need the girl, Ure, just leverage. Elena clamped a hand over her mouth, forcing her breath silent. Then she heard something else. the front door slamming open. Footsteps heavy, purposeful, furious. Cameron. The air changed, instantly shifting with the lethal force of the man who owned the shadows. His voice rolled through the mansion like thunder. Touch her, and every last one of you dies tonight. Gunfire exploded, echoes crashing through the marble halls. Elena pressed herself against the wall, praying for Sophie, praying for Cameron. She heard men screaming one by one, cut down fast and violently. Cameron moved with terrifying precision, each shot controlled, each strike merciless. The house fell silent in seconds. Elena's breath broke unevenly when she heard his voice again, this time closer, raw with fear. Elena. Elena, where are you? She stepped out, shaking so hard her knees nearly buckled. Cameron turned toward her, the rage in his eyes replaced by sheer terror and relief. He ran to her, grabbing her face, scanning her body for wounds, breathing like a man who had just survived drowning. Did they touch you? He rasped. Tell me they didn't touch you. She shook her head, tears spilling. I am okay, Cameron. I am okay. Sophie is safe. I put her in the panic room. I didn't let them near her. His hands trembled on her cheeks, his forehead pressed to hers, his voice breaking. You saved her, Elena. You saved what matters most in my world. Before she could speak, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel his heart pounding against her own, a fierce, violent rhythm, fueled by love, terror, fury, and something deeper than all three. He cupped her face again, looking into her eyes, with a vow stronger than any promise he had ever made. I swear to you, Elena, no one touches you, no one threatens you, no one comes near you ever again. I will burn down cities before I let this happen twice. You are mine to protect. Mine. She didn't correct him. She didn't pull away. Because in that moment, she realized something powerful and terrifying. Cameron wasn't afraid of losing his empire. He was afraid of losing her. And for the first time, she understood just how deep his feelings truly ran. The next morning, the mansion felt different. Not safer. Not calmer. But awakened. As though the walls themselves had heard Cameron Valenti's fury and were now waiting for what he would do next. Guards flooded every entrance. Strategists arrived before sunrise. Cameron's men whispered about retaliation and blood and war. But Cameron, the man who once commanded fear with a single look, walked through the chaos with only one thought in his mind. Elena. He found her in Sophie's room, sitting on the edge of the bed, while Sophie slept curled around her stuffed bear. Elena had not closed her eyes all night. She stared at the window as if danger still waited outside. When Cameron stepped inside, she lifted her head. The exhaustion in her eyes nearly broke him. You should rest, he said, gently sitting beside her. I can't, she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. He reached for her hand, slowly giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Her fingers trembled in his. They came for me, she whispered, not for Sophie. Cameron, for me. They came because of me. No, he said sharply, they came because of me, Elena. You are only a target because you matter to me, and I swear to you, I will end every threat before they come close again. But that was exactly what terrified her. Cameron leaned closer, lowering his voice. Elena, listen to me. I have dealt with enemies my entire life. This one is nothing compared to what I can do when you are at risk. I won't let you disappear into fear. Not now, not ever. She looked at him, her voice cracking. You can't promise that. I can, he said, and this time his voice shook, because I have already made a decision. A decision. He took a breath, bracing himself. I am leaving this life. The words struck her harder than the gunshots from the night before. Cameron, you can't, she whispered. You're the head of the syndicate. They won't let you walk away. I don't care, he said fiercely. Let them try. I've spent years building something that never mattered. For the first time, I have something worth leaving it for, something worth protecting, someone worth protecting. Her breath caught. Cameron lowered his forehead to hers, closing his eyes. I want a life without guns, without guards, without enemies waiting in the dark. I want a home where Sophie can play outside and you can smile without fear. I want freedom, Alina, and I want it with you." Her heart stuttered. She searched his face for hesitation, for doubt. But there was none. How she whispered, "How can you walk away?" Cameron lifted her chin, meeting her gaze. "I have enough power, leverage, allies, and money to build a new life away from all of this. I can hand the syndicate to men who want the throne more than I ever did. I can vanish with you and Sophie into a place no one will follow." Her chest tightened with a mix of fear and hope. Leaving meant letting go of everything he controlled, everything he knew. It meant trusting her more than he trusted his own empire. "Why," she whispered, her voice trembling, "why would you risk everything for me?" He swallowed hard. "Because you are the only thing I want that I can't replace. Because when I thought they took you last night, I died inside. Because I am in love with you, Alina, more than I knew I could love anyone again." Her breath broke. No one had ever said those words to her. Not with truth. Not with desperation. Not with a trembling voice that sounded like a man confessing his soul. Alina's tears spilled silently as she placed her palm against his cheek. Cameron Valenti, feared by all, worshipped by many, looked at her like she was the only person who mattered. "I love you too," she whispered. His breath left him in a shudder as he pulled her into his arms, holding her, as though the world might end if he let go. They stayed like that until Sophie stirred, waking slowly. When she saw them, Sophie smiled sleepily, as though she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "You're hugging Alina," she said softly, her small voice warm and wise like a child who understood more than she ever admitted. Cameron smiled for the first time in days. "Yes, sweetheart, I am." Sophie climbed into Alina's lap, hugging her tightly. "Daddy is happier when you're here," she whispered into Alina's shoulder, "and you're happier when he's here. I think you both should stay together forever." Alina's eyes filled again. Cameron brushed a hand through Sophie's hair as he whispered, "That's exactly what I plan to do." And in that quiet morning light, something shifted inside all three of them. The danger was still out there. The world was still sharp and brutal. But for the first time, they faced it together.